So let me be brief because I don't want to take our speaker's time. But I will tell you, one of the cool things about being president is you get credit for a lot of things you had nothing to do with. But you get good people doing good things, and good things happen. Lady Shaps won a national championship. I didn't have anything to do with that, but I'll sure ride that wave, won't we? That's kind of fun. And Jim Beck and others have brought Dr. Jerry Taylor here. The Truth and Reconciliation work that has been going on in this city is largely the work of others here at this university. I don't take any credit for that, but I will bask in the glory of that. There are some good things that happen because of good people doing good things. And one of the best things is they brought my friend Dr. Jerry Taylor to town. I've known Jerry because he's been a friend to me when I spent time at Abilene Christian University. And just, grace is all about unmerited favor. He didn't have to be my friend, but he was my friend. And he's a good man. And you're going to just get it. You're going to just appreciate it. But he spoke a moment ago about John 4 and the woman at the well and about the thirst that we have that can only be quenched by that living water. And as he was sharing that, the passage at the end of that context is what really spoke to me. When the disciples came back and said, Jesus, we got some food for you. And Jesus said, I got food to eat you don't know anything about. And I thought, I'm way too much like the disciples. There's a conversation sometimes going on up here and I'm down here. But the answer is that water that Jesus has for us and that food that Jesus has for us, that frankly, we live in a world that doesn't know anything about that, but that's where the answers are. Jesus really is the answer to all the questions. And here's a brother that understands that, and you're gonna recognize. I love the Jesus test. You want to boil it down, you want it simple, you want to know what's on the final exam? By their fruits, you'll recognize them. By their fruits. Here's a man that has the fruit of the Spirit in his life. Dr. Taylor, come and share. As he's coming up, I'll tell you one last thing. He's the founding director of the Carl Spain Center at ACU. It's all about racial reconciliation. This is a man of letters. He's got a bachelor's degree from a little school in Terrell, and he's got his master's from SMU in the Perkins School, was where he's got his doctorate from. So he's got all the letters. But I think about Acts 4. How'd this man get all this knowledge? Without ever having said, no, he studied the feet of Jesus. And you'll see it. Dr. Taylor, let's welcome him.
It is so good to be here with you today and to once again be blessed by the Almighty Creator, to be in the company of your wonderful president, Dr. Scott McDowell, and to also have the opportunity to be in the company of the soldier of the cross in the person Brother Jim Beck, and the community of believers that we have been privileged to meet here since yesterday. And to you, the students, I'm so grateful to be able to look into your eyes and to see a bright future, not only for the church, but also for the nation and for the world in which we live. You are stepping into positions of responsibility. You will be entrusted with great power and wealth as the older generations are moving off the scene. But the greatest wealth that we hope that we can bequeath to you is not our material possessions, but the spiritual wealth that will never run out. The spiritual economy never suffers a recession or a depression. It is always constant, and the resources are unlimited because they are connected to the source, which is God himself. I will hurry quickly to present the message for today. It comes from the book of James, chapter 1, beginning with verse 1 and ending with verse 12. To the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, greetings. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but the rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls, and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away, even while they go about their business. Consider it pure joy. Today, the nation is facing a severe trial that seems to have no end in sight. No matter the street we walk down, death threats stand on every corner. We are constantly under the surveillance of the coronavirus. The illness actively monitors every move that we make. Social unrest in the streets is driving rest from the hearts of the American people. Political division has robbed the country of a common vision of goodwill towards all men and women. We are overwhelmed with the tragedy of trials of all kinds, on all sides, coming from all directions. Trials sometimes disguise themselves as sick parents, quarreling friends, relatives with terminal illnesses, business failures, moral failures, suicidal thoughts, and unexpected betrayals. Trials sometimes create anxiety attacks that surround us like alligators that gather around a capsized boat in a Louisiana swamp. But James writes his letter to Christians scattered among the nations who had been blown about by the high-velocity winds in a hurricane season of terrifying trials. Due to the unrelenting pressures and the stubborn stresses of life, some Christians abandoned their faith. Answers to their questions couldn't come fast enough. Solutions to their problems couldn't be found. Their quest to understand their painful circumstances could not be satisfied. They had grown tired of trying to figure it all out. It is in this urgent state of despair and confusion that James encourages Christians to consider it pure joy as trials of many kinds are encountered. In order to fully understand what James means when he says, consider it pure joy, we must consider the word consider. The word consider means to think. It means to muse over. It means to observe. It means to give attention to. It means to look at. It means to evaluate stressful and stretching situations. All kinds of amusements have been invented, to keep us from wisely musing, to keep us from wisely thinking over the trials of many kinds that assault us. When we abdicate our responsibility to think, we then give others the permission to think for us. Muse means to think. Amuse means not to think. Amusements keep people from doing serious thinking. Amusement parks and other forms of entertainment are designed to help us escape the tough, hard task of thinking. James tells Christians not to run from their trials, but to face them straightforwardly without allowing their thinking to be arrested. We as a nation are in the moment of serious crisis. We must not shrink back from what the current hour of crisis demands of us. Everything may be shutting down around us, but we must not shut down our mental faculties. We need our mental faculties to think. We need our mental faculties to meditate, to ponder, to muse over, and to figure it out. Again, James says, consider it pure joy. Too many people have a problem with it. Nevertheless, we must learn to deal with the it of life. Some people just don't want to deal with it. They try not to think about it. All they want to do is to get out of it. They just want it to be over. They have never seen it like this before. When James uses the phrase consider it, it reminds me of a movie that came out in 2017 called It. The movie was a horror movie about a clown that was terrorizing a group of kids in a small town. And the only way that they could defeat the terrifying clown was they had to consider, they had to think, they had to muse collectively together about how they were going to get rid of it. And today, there is another clown on the loose, terrifying and harassing towns and cities all across the nation and around the world. It is the clown of racism. It is the clown that we call Corona, the Corona clown. And the young people in the movie, they had to band together in order to defeat this common enemy. And I believe that we too must band together in the midst of this crisis and seek a higher way of thinking. This crisis that we face in our country, the race problem that we face, it will require us to rely upon a divine mind that has a divine logic and a divine reasoning and a divine intelligence. We must remember that the mind of Christ is superior to the corrupt logic and ungodly reasoning that exist in our fallen world. Let us look at the national crisis through the eyes of God's divine wisdom. When facing trials of many kinds, we normally turn to friends for advice. We turn to mentors for guidance. We turn to counselors for counsel. We turn to pastors and elders for leadership. We turn to spiritual directors and spiritual counsels for spiritual direction. But these are the times that require us to turn to a greater source of eternal wisdom. And verse 5, James says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. There are trials in life that education cannot educate us enough to understand them. There are trials in life that information cannot inform us enough to explain them. There are some trials in life that knowledge cannot train us enough to deal with them. God's wisdom is our truest solution to the national crisis of race that is in our country today. James advises us to have pure joy when facing such trials. Pure joy is only experienced when it is connected to pure wisdom. James describes pure wisdom in James chapter 3. He says that pure wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. Then it is peace-loving. It is considerate. It is submissive. It is full of mercy and full of good fruit. It is impartial and it is sincere. Now, James describes another kind of wisdom as being impure wisdom. Impure wisdom is a deadly contaminant and should never be allowed to mix with the pure wisdom of heaven. He describes the world's impure wisdom as harboring bitter envy, selfish ambition, as being boastful and denial of the truth. James says such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. He says, for where you have envy, where you have selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. Our time in this world is limited, and it is futile to engage in class warfare over material things, using worldly wisdom to fight over things we can't even take with us out of this life. The wisdom of heaven reminds us that it is our common heritage in Christ Jesus that can bring peace into our hearts and therefore bring peace into our world. The writer says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Keep your eyes on him, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. I know that looking at the way things are, it can sometimes seem hopeless. I know that we have tried and we've tried and we've tried to overcome the race problem in America, and it seems as if we take 10 steps forward and 20 steps backwards. But I stand here today to say that this is our Father's world. God created the world, and he's going to get his world to the place where he wants it to be, where every tongue is going to have to confess and every knee is going to have to bow and admit that he is the God of glory and that this is his world. So don't you grow weary, children. Don't you get tired. Don't give up, because God is still in control. It may look as if human beings are in control of the world, but this is still our Father's world. He owns the world. He owns the cattle of 1,000 hills, and he owns the hills that the cattle are on as well. This is God's world, and no matter how bleak and dark and hopeless it may look, we must remember to keep our eyes on Jesus, because tomorrow is Good Friday. And on Good Friday, it looked as if death had knocked Jesus out on the canvas of the universe. But early Sunday morning, Jesus got up from the grave, declaring all power in heaven and on earth is in my hands. Death thought he had him, but Jesus got up, showing death that he had knocked death out. And I'm here to tell you, we don't have to live in the fear of death anymore, because we are keeping our eyes fixed on the conqueror of death, hell, and the grave. And it was on that day that Jesus could finally say at the end of his life, "It is finished." My, my, my. That's why you got to consider it, because one day it will be finished. Framed by the religious establishment, Jesus could finally say, "It is finished." His own people rejected him because he did not show favoritism to his own people, but was willing to do and to show love among those who were outside of his group. He could finally say, "It is finished." His own family accused him of being a lunatic, all because he sought to do the will of his Father. He could finally say, "It is finished." His students misunderstood him. His friends betrayed him with the kiss. Disciples deserted him. He was acquainted with grief, yet he could say, "It is finished." Had bouts with depression, lonely nights in isolation, abandoned in prayer, but yet he could say on Good Friday, "It is finished." He yielded up the ghost and then went on back to glory with those words from his lips saying, "It is finished." And one day we will be able to say, "It is finished." Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Heartache may endure for a night, but comfort comes in the morning. Depression may endure for a night, but relief comes in the morning. Grief may endure for a night, but consolation comes in the morning. And when morning comes, all strife will disappear at the breaking of dawn. Just hold on, don't faint, don't grow weary. And when morning comes, weapons are beaten into plowshares, and soldiers will study war no more. When morning comes, sickness will be no more, and sorrows will have no home. Don't faint, don't grow weary. Keep your thinking cap on. Consider whatever life puts in front of you, but consider it from God's perspective. Because from God's perspective, there's always a winning hand. May God bless you, and may you continue to walk faithfully in his will and allow him to continue to make a difference in you, and then allow him to make a difference through you in the world in which you live. God bless you. Thank you.